preparing for a program self-study. I'd like to welcome the participants to this webinar and talk through some approaches that we have used that may be of assistance to you as you're doing the work in your organizations. Let me first begin by introducing myself. My name is Doug Levins. I'm a retired Career and Technical Education Director from the Washington, Saratoga, Warren, Hamilton, Essex BOCES. I'm also the past president of the Association for Career and Technical Education Association. And in addition, with me, I have Sarah Batiste, who is the Curriculum Coordinator for School Support Services, also at the Washington, Saratoga, Warren, Hamilton, Essex BOCES, and quite honestly is the person that operationalizes in this BOCES the concepts and the material that we're going to be presenting to you today. So let me get started by letting you know that much of the work that I'll be commenting on as a past director is kind of the bigger picture, more conceptual framework for how we approach a self-study. Sarah will be spending much of her time taking those concepts and drilling a little bit deeper to express kind of how they play themselves out here at the BOCES. And so when you look at the slide that is in front of you now, know that these reapproval or New York State certification process steps happen here at the BOCES. They all happen at your places as well. You have to conduct a self-study. Most of you know that there's some type of external review that needs to be done. Often there are modifications to the work that is seen by the external review committee to make the appropriate adjustments. And then from there, a completed application goes to and is submitted to the State Education Department for reapproval. So let's start with the steps that we take, knowing that there are many ways that you can approach the self-study process, as long as, of course, it's within the guidelines that are articulated by the state of New York. And so the steps that I'm showing you here are the basic blocks, if you will, that we take the steps that I've already mentioned and we drill down in each of them as we step our programs through the approval process. So the first basic block, again, and Sarah will talk about these in more detail, is where the beginning of a school year, because each of our reviews do take a complete year to do. We usually do 5 or 6 CTE programs at one time, which means every year we've got some programs that are under review, and we usually use a 4 or 5 year cycle to make sure that we can spend quality time with them to ensure that they are a quality program and not only deliver, quite honestly, on the standards associated with this process, but also exceed them. And so we start with instructors who have either taken their curriculum from where it was the previous year and begin to update those curriculums, because all of the program elements start with what do we intend students to know and be able to do, and what do we want them to look like upon exiting the program. From here, we take a little bit different approach than what many of my colleagues, I think, in the state have taken. We actually go into what we call audits. There are 2 of them, as you can see. We have a business and industry audit, and we have an academic audit. Now, in the business audit side, we bring multiple businesses from our region together to review all of not only those curriculums that I mentioned in the first block, but all the elements of the program for them to look at that pertain to them. As you would well imagine, they're not spending time on the educational aspects of the program, but more on the business skills and knowledge side. And the reason we call them audits is because this isn't simply a review. We want them literally to audit every element of what we do to make sure that the employability profiles match the units that we put in place, which match the lesson plans we put in place, that match the technical assessments that we offer. So we're asking them to cross-reference from their perspectives as industry people what this looks like. In addition, you should know that all of our programs have craft committees or committees that they routinely meet with. Those that we convene in our audits are not members of those committees. We actually bring in other people from industry that are oftentimes in supervisory positions or master technicians, if that's the case. And we do that because not only do we have the local flavor of the consultant committees or craft committees, but we also have another group that routinely doesn't see this, and we do that because we want to make sure there's always a fresh eye to what we're doing. The academic audits do precisely the same thing, of course, with the exception of we're using academic teachers from our region. We have 31 school districts. Those school districts agreed to send ELA and math teachers because those are the two academic programs that we integrate into all of our CTE programs. And so we may have 12 to 15 to 18 different either math or English instructors that come and literally audit the program. And that audit function is, again, similar to the business and industry audits, where we're not looking for them just to generally review it. We're looking for them to really go very deep. From there, we take the audits, both the business industry and academic audits, and translate that into an instructor review, where they again review the material and the feedback that we've received, so that once that feedback is obtained, we change, adjust, modify, add, subtract based on the feedback we get, and then it goes to an internal review team. So our complete self-study starts with the instructors, and it takes multiple steps, which is why it takes a year. We don't have one just large committee, if you will, that looks at everything. We actually chunk them up into pieces. Those audits, by the way, are usually somewhere between a day and a half, and 2 days, depending on which program that we're auditing. So we have commitment from our regional businesses and schools to join us when those audits take place.
So the next piece of information that you're looking at are typically the members of our self-study team. And these members spread out through the different iterations that Doug just described. So our building principals and myself work to help coordinate the collection of documentation, to build the agendas, to get our regional business and industry experts and academic teachers to come to our different audit days. Our instructors, obviously both CT and academic, play a huge role in not only the preparation and presentation of their documentation, but to work with the business and industry auditors and academic auditors to share the different elements associated with our program, to take them on tours, to answer questions, to follow up with them. Additionally, in addition to having business and industry representatives that come to our business and industry audit, which are typically regional business owners, business organizations, folks that are really out in the field, that are experts in the field. We also invite higher education representatives. The bonus to not only having those folks come and give us feedback about our programs is it's a nice carryover into our articulation agreement process. They get a look at everything we do, so it creates a nice integration to building future articulation agreements. Our internal review team not only has myself and the teachers and the building principals continuing to look at our documentation and to look at our programs, but it also includes special education teachers and counselors. So this is the typical individuals involved in our entire self-study iteration process.
The only thing I would add would be we do the business audits first before the academic audits, because academics are integrated into CTE, which have a tendency to be technical knowledge and skill. So we try to build the technical platform so that when the academic auditors come in, then they can see how the academic pieces are pushed into or integrated into the CTE program.
So we spoke about already we've spoke about we spoke about the green boxes, the instructor building and adjusting their curriculum and their programming and putting together documentation for review. And then we've also already spoke about the business and industry audit as well as the academic audit. So we wanted to include what are some of those elements that these folks are taking a look at. So we do include, we've created an electronic binder process. And in that binder, we include some of these elements that are listed here on the screen that you can see. We have units of study, we have our competency/standards, scope and sequence, lesson plans, projects, assessments, technical assessment information. We include data on our student performance, our enrollment numbers, any follow-up information that we have to share. We include information about our teachers, our work-based learning programs. That includes placements, hours, as well as documents that we use to not only log hours, but also evaluate students' progress in their work-based learning experiences. Folks can see our schedules. They do take a tour of our facilities to see our equipment and our spaces. Through our curriculum documents, we're able to show how we make our curriculum and instruction accessible to all of the diverse students that we serve. We look at our competencies as related to our employability profile. And all of these things are not only included in the electronic binder, but they're talked about, and we're going to move on to the next piece where we talk about how they're actually evaluated through the audit process.
So with that in mind, we're going to shift kind of from the kind of bigger picture conceptual framework to, as Sarah's mentioning, the details, because in the end, every step, as I've noted, is an audit, and those audits indicate that we are asking the folks that come to evaluate our programs to actually evaluate and provide scores, quite honestly. So what we have done, and we will show you at least a part of, and we'll make available to you in total, is a comprehensive curriculum guide that outlines very specifically every move that we make in this process. And so for now, I'm going to show you the table of contents from that document. And what you'll notice is that from an instructor perspective, an auditor perspective, from a curriculum coordinator perspective, a principal, it doesn't matter. Everything is laid out to the nth degree, quite honestly, so that as new faculty members come in and as veterans become used to the system, we have documented every step that's to be taken, what it's to look like, what form it's to come in, how it's to be evaluated, and we have a refined system that does that. In large measure, as you can tell from the screen, many of the items are curricular documents. And so let me start by saying that we introduced the whole process, as you'll notice on page 3. Again, we'll show you elements of it, but not the whole thing, because it's just way too large to do at one time. What we think the essential elements are, some of which you've already seen. We have a plan of work for the instructors. We do that because not every instructor is at the same spot. For example, somebody that's brand new to a construction trades program as a new teacher may not be in the same place as the welding teacher who's been here for 15 years. So they develop their own plan of work, but it's around all of the documents that we're noting here. This 5 silos thing that you're seeing is nothing more than the 5 curriculums that we offer, because every program has the technical skills, the work readiness skills. We have career and financial management, and then, as I've mentioned, we offer English and math. And so there are literally 5 curriculums that are managed over a 2-year period for every single instructor. We ask for course descriptions to be completed. course syllabus to be completed, a scope and sequence, as Sarah has mentioned. We have a section on integrated academics that speak to how we integrate the standards into all of that work over 2 years. In fact, that's represented in a crosswalk, which is a term you may be familiar with, where we actually show where a particular standard meets a technical standard. We have units, lesson plans, student portfolios, the employability profile, which most people have. And then we even speak to what the role is of the consultant committee, which again, I'm going to say are not the auditors, but they still play a role in our system. And then all the guidelines, even right down to what do the teachers use as their presentation model when they're communicating their material to any kind of auditor. At the same time, we also have other documents that are kind of supplemental resources that are actually, what do the reports look like when we do the individual reviews? How is the feedback arranged and arrayed so that we can provide that back to the instructors so they can address that material? We do the same thing for the academic folks. And even the external review folks see all of the documents over time. It's like an amassing of that material over time so they see it when they do those reviews. And then some self-study summary report, and then in the end, all of the scheduling that needs to be done. And as you can see, there's 94 pages, and of course, being bigger doesn't make it better, but we'll tell you that if you look at this document and provide it to you, that you can see that it's very comprehensive. And every one of those items where auditors are looking at evaluating, we have to meet minimum threshold scores, which means numbers are assigned. So if we have 5 auditors in the business and industry side, we will pull all of their data together and average them out and ask, so out of 5, how did a particular program score on their employability profile? How did they score on integrated academics if it's an academic audit? And so every one of those documents is designed to actually lay this thing out so that when we're talking to people, again, who are either new or veterans, we really need to point to the documents and the page those things are on, and they're utilized the entire year in order to step everyone through updates of curriculum. So when we do a business and industry audit, we start with the instructor presentation. And the instructor presentation, as I mentioned, there's a template for that that already speaks specifically to what should be included. Now, we definitely offer up the possibility of having more in it than what's here, but what we want to do is make sure that every auditor, regardless of program, sees the same type of material, which means every one of our instructors operates knowing that they have to have the same types of materials. The only difference in large measure would be the content, obviously welding versus early childhood as an example. Other than that, what it looks like, how it comes across, what it's designed to say, other than content, is all exactly the same. So that would be an example of part of the document that I'm referring to that we would provide information about regarding presentation. At the same time, when we're looking to array the CTE program scope and sequence, you'll notice that it describes what a scope and sequence is, so it doesn't assume everybody understands what that is. It actually speaks to the intention of what the scope and sequence does in the system, and then it actually outlines the requirements. And you'll notice at the very bottom in bold, it basically indicates that this, whatever program is we're talking about, needs to end up with at least a 3.5 on average, with no element below 3. So again, I go back to, if I've got 5 auditors, their average needs to be 3.5 in the scope and sequence section to match what they expect should happen, and no one auditor can be below 3. And if there are scores of that type, their comments that they make along the way are utilized as the platform to make them better. At the same time, you'll notice that there's a scoring guide that we provide to the auditors themselves, and you'll notice what we're asking them to look at. We're asking them to look at standards. We're asking them to comment about the rigor of the program, how relevant what we're doing is. And of course, we do highlight any changes that we've made from the previous year in particular. We show them the business and industry academic pieces that we think are important to show. in this case, the work readiness skills, any technology that's utilized to make it happen, how things are organized, any kind of course completion information, technical assessment pass rates, what those technical assessments are, and anything that we think are transferable skills. So they actually score and rate every single one of those. At the same time, every scope and sequence document, when they're being evaluated by the auditors, are actually looking at a rubric. So of that 4-point rubric that we're mentioning, you can see that on the business and industry standards, they can rate it a 1, which has, is very weak or limited, all the way up to being a lot more comprehensive, more measurable, and so on. So we're guiding our auditors to be able to articulate where they think we are in the grand scheme of things. What's also nice about this is the instructors know that's how things are being evaluated. So if they're building materials based on this rubric, then they're also putting themselves in the best possible spot to be evaluated the right way and to be moved on to the next step. Last comment I would make is every document that we have in that 94-page large document that we use for purposes of self-study is outlined exactly the same way. There's always an expression of what the intention of the document is, what should be a part of it, and what standards it needs to meet. And there's a rubric that goes along with every single one so that auditors understand how they should rate them. And again, we can make available that complete document so you can see how that flows that way. Units look like that, lesson plans look like that, every document that we ask teachers to develop.
So what does the day look like? Just some commentary on that. Essentially, the business and industry audit team, which is the local or regional group of business and industry experts, comes in. We do an instructor presentation. You've already viewed the guidelines for the presentation. There's specific information that we want to share with them for them to get an overview perspective of the program as a whole. Following the presentation, we take them on a classroom tour. They get to observe live work in action. They get to see our facility. They get to see the types of equipment students are working with. Following that tour and that live work observation, we do the documentation review. We've already indicated to you through our curriculum guide table of contents that we looked at, as well as previous slides, the types of curriculum documents that are included in this electronic binder. And as Doug describes, while they're looking through these documents, for example, the scope and sequence documents, they are using that rubric that we displayed and the report document to essentially evaluate and score the intentions of the document, the quality of the document, and then provide us any sort of anecdotal feedback that we could use for future adjustments. Following that, the report document is developed and shared with instructors during our instructor review process, which includes administrators and myself as a collaborative team to discuss the results. The academic audit is very similar, as you can see. It includes all of those same elements. It's just a different crowd of people. This includes our integrated ELA and math teachers, as well as component school district, high school ELA and math teachers that essentially become your audit group. Just to show you an example of, again, how we use the rubric and the report document, I can show you the integrated academics piece that essentially this audit group would look at. Again, we describe what the intentions of this integrated academics section are all about, the specific requirements or the things that folks would be looking at to essentially evaluate our integrated academics program. Again, there's a report document with each section that they're looking at and a corresponding rubric 1 to 4, where they can evaluate those specific documents as well as the information that we provide in the presentation and the tour to make an overall evaluation or assessment of how we're delivering our integrated academics program. And again, we essentially take all of the information that is shared during this time, during this process. We review it as a team with the instructors and make appropriate programmatic adjustments. So this next slide goes into what I just spoke about, the instructor review. Just to add to this process, I find this to be highly beneficial conversation because we've just now sat with, experts in both business and industry and experts in academic classrooms to gain their feedback, to give us some input and to evaluate what we're doing. And this information really does help us to make necessary program adjustments and to really talk about and be on the same page with the types of things that we're providing for our students in our program. We use the template. This is an example of the business and industry template. And if I just go to the first page, you can see it looks like a document straight out of our curriculum guide that we've been showing you. So essentially, the audit group would have put their scores and comments and recommendations on this report document, and then we'd use this report document during our instructor review conversations. And we tabulate all of the comments and the scores into one document so it's easily read and understood by the group. And again, we have the same type of report document for our academic audit as well. And these report documents are included in the section B of the curriculum guide that we've been reviewing.
So as an example of that, know that not every comment that we get back from an audit team is actually put in play. That in large measure is due to not being able to actually do it. I know we've had business auditors that would say, you need this particular piece of equipment in your lab. And so we may have a way to do the task without getting that particular piece that perhaps we can't afford. So that may be an example of not doing something that they've asked us to do. The other example would be an auto tech example where our region might think that hybrids and the notion of hybrid autos need to have a greater play in our curriculum. And so if we have the preponderance of auditors that would say something like that, then we would take that more to the bank, if you will, and have that in that instructor review, a discussion around how we're able to actually get that actually done. If we had one auditor that said, let's do hybrids, and 5 others said, didn't say that that was terribly important, we might not operationalize it. So when all is said and done, those reviews, to Sarah's point, are important because it does provide feedback, and it also allows us to consider things that we think we should be able to do and can do based on what we're being told by those auditors. So we have instructors doing their curriculum. We have 2 types of audits with all sorts of feedback that allow us to know whether we're on the right track or not. We have reviews with the instructors to make sure that they're fully apprised of what the auditors have said and allow that feedback to be used to change or modify our program. Once all of those steps are done, then there is an internal review team, which are made up of people that are not part of the reviews that we've done so far. So as you can see kind of from our discussion, we've got 10, 20, 25, 30 people looking at these materials over time, and they come with different expertise to do so. In the case of the internal review team, it by its nature is designed to make sure that we are fully ready, that we've dotted all I's and crossed T's on the feedback we've received, and we've made it appropriate to what we received before it goes to the external review. Now, our work today is not to talk about the external review team, but it should suffice though Sarah will provide a little bit more detail about this, that particular group is the one that kind of looks at everything to make sure that when we do go to the external review, that the possibility of them accepting it and agreeing with our work is much greater. So that's the nature of that particular team. For some more details, Sarah.
So the document that this team looks at, the internal review team looks at, is our actual self-study document. So the self-study document that we use, which again is an attachment in section B of the curriculum guide that we've been referencing, this document essentially takes everything that we have worked on thus far in each audit, all of the feedback that we've received, the things that we're going to make actionable during the instructor review. And excuse that there's a little bit of a misalignment because it is a Word document that's in Google, so sometimes it misaligns, but if you download it, it will not misalign. But essentially, it takes all of the process feedback and it puts it into one place, as well as the scores that we received through our rubric use in each of the audits. And so our internal review team gets, again, they get an opportunity to hear the instructor presentation, and they also get to see the compiled self-study document to see all of the actionable steps that have occurred as a result of each part of the self-study process. And they too can provide comment, suggestions, input into any further adjustments that would need to be made programmatically before we present to the external review committee.
So lastly, about the guide that we use, I will mention that in part, the reason that we wanted to create something so comprehensive was so that there wasn't anyone who works within this system that's guessing about what has to happen, when it needs to happen, and what needs to be included, which quite honestly, I think has been liberating for our teachers, because instead of constantly figuring out what to do next, we've outlined it in such a way where the process has been made abundantly clear, and then that liberates them to focus on the content of what they do, the technical skills versus the academic skills, or any program adjustments that they think they need to make, because the construct that we've developed and the series of documents have made it clear what we're looking for and how to do it. And at the same time, the auditors have often remarked that the way in which this is done is very organized and has enough detail for them, because you can well imagine that several business auditors, for example, coming into an educational venue, something they're not normally used to, trying to figure out what they should say, whether they should be too hard or too soft or not say enough or whatever. This outlines it for them so they don't have to worry about those kind of things. And we get the most honest feedback, quite honestly, because in the end, this is all about making sure the programs are the way they're supposed to be for the kids that we serve. So given that, I think we're well within our 30 minutes, but there may be a chance now for questions. And so we'll turn it back to Gretchen.
All right, great, thank you. So there's no questions at this time. If we want to give the attendees a minute or two, we can wait and see if any come in.
Sure.
All right, it doesn't look like we have any questions. We did get a few comments, though. Attendees saying thank you to Sarah and Doug for your presentation. And on behalf of the Technical Assistance Center, thank you to our attendees for joining us today. And as a reminder, this presentation was recorded and will be posted on nyctecenter.org within 72 hours.
Terrific.